Pope Francis, the first pope from the Americas and outside the West, was elected in 2013 to lead the Catholic Church amidst crises like corruption, clerical sexual abuse, and Vatican intrigue. His mandate was to reform the Vatican, enhance transparency, and address scandals. His papacy focuses on serving the poor and marginalized, simplifying communication and restructuring the church. Pope Francis championed anti-imperialism, local pastoral autonomy, and youth empowerment in Africa is currently hospitalized with pneumonia in both lungs. Details of the journey and legacies of Pope Francis are captured in an article titled "Centering the Voiceless: Pope Francis's Enduring Global Impact." To give more insight on his papacy is a research professor of World Christianity and African Studies, DePaul University, and the author of the article in question, Reverend Father Stan Chu ILO. Father Stan, we welcome you on the news this afternoon.
Thank you very much.
In your article, you describe Pope Francis inheriting a church in crisis in 2013. What do you think was the most pressing challenge he faced at the start of his papacy, and how well do you believe he has addressed it over the past 12 years?
Yeah, thank you very much for your question. I think that at the beginning of the papacy of Pope Francis, the Catholic Church faced a crisis of confidence because of the kinds of news that was coming out from the Vatican and from different parts of the world. And normally some of these problems, normal problems that every institution faces, but for a religious institution, they could be amplified. But more so, people expect us, those of us in religion and religious leaders, to embody the finest values and virtues of our faith. So I think it was a crisis of confidence in the credibility of the church, the crisis of authority as to the church's moral standing in the world, and the church's ability to communicate the message of the gospel. Now, Pope Francis handled these problems, I think, very effectively and efficiently, because first, he addressed radically some of the problems that had to deal with clerical sexual abuse. He instituted different kinds of reforms, transparency, accountability. He called for a summit on clerical sexual abuse in 2018 and in 2019 in order to address these problems. He also reformed the Roman Curia, that is the highest administrative structure that runs the Vatican. He reformed it. He published a new law about how to create coherence, coordination, and accountability within the system. And then he focused the attention of the church on what I think has made many people to be so attracted to him, which is focusing on the poor, the marginalized, those who are suffering, which is exactly what Jesus Christ did when he said, "I came to proclaim good news to the poor, to announce liberty to captives." So I think that's what Pope Francis did. This is a pope who will go to prisons, who will wash the feet of prisoners in the prison, men and women. This is a pope who knelt down to kiss the feet of the warring parties from South Sudan. And you can name many other things that has actually captivated the world and restored confidence in the authority of the papacy, restored confidence in the church's credibility, and made the church attractive to so many people, especially young people and those who are disaffiliating from the church, especially in the Western Hemisphere.
Limited African representation at the Vatican. What steps do you think Pope Francis could still take despite his current health condition to address this gap?
I think that this has been a challenge. I think some of us who had the privilege of doing some work for the Vatican, that for the first time in perhaps over 30 years. At this present time, we don't have an African cardinal heading any of the Vatican dicasteries. That is what you would call in secular parlance, that would be like ministries. So we have Cardinal Ambongo of Congo DRC, belonging to the group of 8 cardinals who advise the Pope. Now, but he is not a member of any of the dicasteries. He's not heading any of the dicasteries. Before now, we had Cardinal Turkson of Ghana heading the dicastery on promoting integral human development. We had Cardinal Sarah of Guinea heading the dicastery for sacred worship that regulates all the church's divine worship, the liturgy, all the sacraments and all that. And going further back, we had Cardinal Ganten of Benin Republic during the time of Pope John Paul II, who was the dean of the Cardinal College. So there is a concern that something needs to be done, because the highest ranking official today from Africa for the Vatican is Archbishop Fortunatus Nwachukwu, who is from, interestingly, is from Nigeria, but he's an archbishop and he doesn't head any of the offices.
With Pope Francis now in critical condition, from the last check, February 27, 2025, how do you think his hospitalization might affect the ongoing reforms and the church's direction in the near future?
Well, part of the good news we received from the Vatican last night is that the Pope has turned a corner. He's healthier than ever now. He's no longer in critical condition, but it is still cautious optimism. However, to your question as to whether his hospitalization will stall the reform, there is a very important thing that Pope Francis did. Between 2021 and last year, he called the entire church to the Synod on Synodality, a moment to consult with all stakeholders in the church. Everyone was invited to the table of dialogue. So I think that some of the decisions made already at the conclusion of that Synod on Synodality in Rome in October emphasized the need for representation, equitable representation of all voices in the church, emphasized also the need for decentralization, because I think that, in fairness to Pope Francis, he says that people do not need to come to Rome in order to effect the reforms in their local community. So it is no longer about, in his thinking, representation at the Vatican, but rather he is giving local leaders, bishops, priests, religious, laity, giving them, and Catholic institutions, giving them the autonomy to carry out locally solutions that address contextual local problems. So I think that Synod on Synodality, we are just in the phase of implementation, and it is being institutionalized through the system, structures, and procedures in the church right now. And so I think that the Pope, even though he's hospitalized, that the changes that he has proposed are also, I think, can be carried on even with his hospitalization, because it's not just built on the Pope himself.
Father Stan, you framed his papacy as a redefinition of Catholicism toward mercy and care for the earth. Now, looking ahead, what do you hope his lasting impact will be, especially if his time as Pope is nearing an end?
Well, we hope that his time as Pope doesn't come to an end. That is why we are praying. And today, the entire African Catholics at 4 p.m. Nigerian time, we are praying. Over 1,000 Catholics will be praying for his recovery. However, in terms of his legacy, I think this Pope has been a very consequential Pope. First, his idea of the people of God. This is an idea that is rooted at the very heart of Catholicism and Christianity. Jesus came for all of us, not some of us. That means that everyone counts. That is why in the Bible we hear the Good Shepherd going in search of the lost. So that is the first thing that I think Pope Francis has taught us as a church in terms of redefinition. Is not simply a church of the pure, a church of saints, a church of the best of humankind, but rather a church of the poor, a church for the wounded, the broken, the vulnerable, the lost, a church of those who are crying. So he has redefined that understanding of Catholicism, not just as a rule-based, okay, you must obey the law. Once I remember him telling priests that those who come to the confessional confessing their sins to you, they are not coming to a torture chamber where you have to tell them all that is evil, all that is bad, and threaten them with hellfire. So he talks of a church of mercy. The second is the process that he introduced. This synodal process, there has never been anything like that in the Catholic Church or in any Christian group where the entire church for 2 years was summoned to the table of dialogue. And he said, there is no topic that is off the table. Speak courageously, speak boldly, speak honestly, and let us listen. The church is a listening church. And that process has kind of cascaded. That means it is now all over the place. So when you hear of Catholicism, we talk about a synodal church, a church that listens, a church that journeys together hand in hand, but not only with Catholics, but journeys together with other Christians, people of other faiths, that journeys together with the world of nature. This Pope will also be remembered as the ecological Pope, the Green Pope, the one who published that powerful document, Laudato Si, using the words of Francis, the saint whose name he chose, that invited the whole world. Let us take care of this planet. It is our common home. The earth is filled with filth. We need to purify the air. We need to take care of our health, the health of every person, the health of the environment, the climate, and the health of our spiritual life, our souls. So I think at these three levels, on these three levels, that I find this Pope very consequential for Catholicism, and he is the kind of leader that I think the world needs today.
Many thanks, Reverend Father Stan Chu, ILO, for joining us on Signature TV News all the way from Chicago, United States of America.
You're welcome.